All right, how's everyone doing today?
Great.
Great. So we got an exciting topic. We're going to go deep into the metaverse. So you see the title here, Into the Battleverse, China's Metaverse Report. So China's been talking a lot about the metaverse, military applications. We're going to get into that. I just want to do a quick note on this word battleverse. We're going to get into this more. So it's two words together, battlefield and metaverse. So I've combined those two and translated it as the battleverse. So if there's something that I may miss or other questions you have, you also have the option have an article in the MCA Journal and also in Cyber Magazine. And also I actually just did a recent interview with Voice of America, answering some questions there as well. So just to let you know. So just a real quick overview of my background here. So currently, I work at China Aerospace Studies Institute, and I see a couple colleagues here. So thank you for representing and coming to my talk. Appreciate that very much. So we are part of Air University, more broadly, the Department of the Air Force, and our focus is People's Liberation Army. We cover everything that flies, and so everyone has to be language capable, understand Mandarin, read, write, etc. And we're constantly monitoring and reading the news, videos, etc. And that's actually how I discovered all this stuff about the metaverse, is just reading the PLA Daily every single day. We have a lot of stuff. A lot of times they don't tell you much, but in this case, I think it's pretty interesting. We'll see. You can let me know. When I'm not doing the China Aerospace Studies Institute, I'm also the Chief Marketing Officer here at mcpa. So for me, I'm very happy everyone that was able to come. I think that HammerCon, this first convention, represents the next chapter for us. And I just want to encourage everyone to talk to each other as we continue to grow this community. Where we are now, I see it getting bigger and bigger. And I'm really excited because, as Joe and others talked about, is that talking to each other. You might be doing something over here and you don't know what's going on. You can learn from each other and grow and build this community so that we can provide, national security and things of that nature that we strive to do. So just another note, I also lived in China for 3 years, doing journalism, worked on a TV show. Most recently, I was at Tsinghua University as a Foreign Fellow. The United States government sponsored me there. Tsinghua University is essentially kind of like MIT of China, you could say, one of the top universities where a lot of the senior leadership of the Chinese Communist Party comes out of, and it was a good learning experience to kind of understand the Chinese perspective. So, but if you have any other questions about my background, things like that, you can chat with me now or after the presentation. So, what are we here for? Why? What is the purpose of this presentation? So, I want to give you, and I've already hinted at this, overview of China's strategic mindset regarding the metaverse and possible military applications. So they've been talking about this. I think it's been very interesting, and I think that I want to share that with you, give you an idea of what's going on there. So just a quick outline of this presentation. So before we get deep dive into what China is doing, I want to talk a little bit about the metaverse. There's no definitive definition. We're going to talk about it a little bit. We're going to get into the major hype happening in China, economically, and other conferences, companies, etc. 5-year plan we'll talk about in a minute. But there's been huge emphasis on metaverse in China. And then I want to place that in the context of China's strategy. Why does this make sense? It's not just a one-off. They think metaverse is neat. It's something bigger. How do we apply that to the strategy that they have? And then we get into some fun stuff. How do you build battleverse? Well, China has told us how they want to do that. So we're going to go into some of the conditions of what makes up battleverse. And then finally, the metaverse war. How do we compete? How do we fight against an adversary, against another adversary in the metaverse? And we have some different combat techniques that they want to use that they discussed. And then finally, get into some conclusions and thoughts, and I want to just mention here, like, this is a nascent technology. This is very new in certain ways. So if you have anything you want to share, you don't have to ask a question. You can also share your thoughts and ideas where you see the metaverse going, because we do have 2 different blocks for this talk. So we should have a little bit of time. So, as promised, what is the metaverse? So this is one definition I used in the paper. The metaverse, post-reality universe, perpetual persistence, multi-user environments, physical reality, digital virtual reality. That kind of, you get a kind of start to get an idea of what the metaverse is. But let's break that down a little bit further. So here we have our friend Mark Zuckerberg doing a little bit of a demo with his MetaMates. That's the name of the employees at Meta now. So if you want to work at Meta, you will become a MetaMate. So just exciting there. But I want to make clear, VR is not the metaverse. It's not a device. So you can put on some goggles. That's not the metaverse, okay? It's device agnostic, right? And some people have described it as this idea of it's a physical internet. And one of the points you see there is using all your senses. So thinking about that, all your senses. So you might be wondering, do they have smell? Is anyone working on smell yet? And yes, people are actually even working in Montreal. There's a couple of companies working on smell with the metaverse and simulating that. But a lot of stuff with haptic feedback going on right now. We won't get into that too much. We're focused on China, but it's pretty interesting. But the idea is, the initial early stages of the internet is very passive, and now it's you're being more interactive. You're doing things. You're creating things, and you're being immersed in it. It's kind of the next stage in the internet. So, and again, it's not going to be just one device. It's going to be adaptable to pretty much anything, right? So, 2021, China said that is year 1 of the metaverse. So here's where we're talking about this metaverse mania that I mentioned in the opening outline. So, this is probably the most text that you'll see on a slide here, because there's so much stuff going on regarding the metaverse in China. So the first thing, and I know my colleagues know about this, CMKI. Basically, it's old Mandarin language database, so lots of articles, academic, etc., magazines. And so when I was first starting with research, I just typed in metaverse to see, would I get many hits back? And over the past, I think now, like 8 months or so, all these articles have come up on the metaverse, thousands of articles, and emphasis. People want to be talking about the metaverse. What is it? What can it be applied to? Different application. All these different articles just on CMKI. So you see a big interest there. Another thing, about 1,600 companies or so have just put in about over the past year or so, 11,000 trademarks with metaverse within the description. So huge there in the private industry. 5-year plans. We have Shanghai, Hefei, Wuhan. All of those have 5-year plans that include aspects of the metaverse. So it's a major deal to kind of include that in your kind of 5-year plan and seeing that elevation status. Other things that you see here, Wuxi City Metaverse Industrial Park, Metaverse Special Committee, Metaverse Industrial Base, Innovation Lab in Shenzhen. Zhongwansun is has the Internet Education Innovation Center. Zhongwansun is basically the tech hub of Beijing itself. So huge emphasis there. Then you see Tsinghua University, where I happened to work for a bit, and they just stood up their metaverse culture laboratory, and it's kind of focused more on like media application of the metaverse and things of that nature. Yeah, all of these things they're looking at it from many different angles. And one of the things that I want to go, we have major conferences too. We have major tech players. I just mentioned a few here. Baidu, Tencent, Alibaba are all pushing to develop different aspects of the metaverse. And there's been a lot of different conferences. There was a conference that was actually used for Chinese application called Xinjiang, which is the metaverse application where they held a meeting, a major conference within the metaverse. Lots of different research happening. Or mentioned seeing cat. I want to mention one specifically that stood out to me. Okay, so it's from the China Institute of Contemporary International Relations, which is very much connected with the Ministry of State Security, which would be at least close to we have the CIA, right? So it's very much a government, Chinese Communist Party controls think tank essentially, and the research that they came out with is called the Metaverse and National Security. So I won't get into all the details of that, but they're looking at what are the national security implications. They're talking about other countries or other entities dominate the metaverse and the potential impact that might have. But they're also worried about the social implications of their own people. And you've already seen limit on students, the amount of video games they can play and things like that. So there is that aspect as well. So there's a lot of things that they're thinking about at this highest level. This is not just some small unknown think tank. This is one of the biggest that China has on national security. Oh, and then you're right. This is Wuxi City High Tech District. So in this area, they have this metaverse industrial park that they've developed there. So we talked about private sector, companies, cities. PLA, People's Liberation Army, had to get on the metaverse fund too. So one of the things that they did was, in this year, the Spring Festival Gala, celebrating Chinese New Year, they had their whole celebration and what they call a metaverse they built for this special event. You can see in the quote, utilizing HTML5, participants were guided by the integration of artificial intelligence, image recognition, semantic analysis, holographic imaging, and other technologies. So the Chinese there, it says entering the main area of the metaverse convention area. So so the PLA had an interest of using it like other companies, other things for this big celebration we have every year. But like I said, how does this make sense? They're so excited about the metaverse. But where is this coming from, right? Where do you think? Let's look to the top. Who is this?
Xi Jinping.
Very nice. Yes.
That's a worldwide himself.
Exactly. So, looking at the top, I think is the first to understand what's going on in China. So this quote was from 2018. So you can look at what I highlighted there. If China's to grow strong, prosperous, rejuvenated, you have to be world-made center of science and high ground of innovation. And you see the next line there, that great rejuvenation of the Chinese nation. So that's important to note. The rejuvenation of China, great rejuvenation of China, and technology, they're connected. So that means that this technology, being a technology superpower, being a first mover in innovation, things like that, is connected to the highest level of strategy. And I want to note Xi Jinping. We're going to go back a little bit to the beginning of his career, and throughout his career, Xi Jinping emphasized technology. He talked about when he was at Fujian, about digital Fujian. This is not something that he thought, oh, technology is cool, let's do it. This has been something for decades. It's been in his mind. And now that he's in power, this is at the highest level. So I need to emphasize that this is the highest level they're pushing, which includes the metaverse, but more broadly, we'll talk about strategy more broadly and how it fits in. So there's a lot of different strategic documents on cyberspace. I actually do a class on that. But this is one I picked. I could have picked a lot of different ones. I think it's a good example. So I'm taking from the National Cyberspace Security Strategy. So as you can see there, cyberspace become a new area for activity equal. So it's equal to land, sea, air, space, national sovereignty. And I want to make notes real quick. Well, one, so all of those domains, cyber is equal. It's not something to be a second-hand sort of important, but we got to focus on other stuff. It's equal. So at the very top level, and also in strategic documents, it's emphasized. And just a quick plug for CASI, we have translated a number of strategic documents. Science and Military Strategies came out recently, and many others that go into more detail about cyber as well as other areas. So if you want to check that out, definitely think that that's important to not just read what's coming out in those mainstream Western media, but what the Chinese are actually saying. You can do that whether you've got language abilities or if you can get something translated from CASI or other places. Definitely do that because you can kind of really understand what they're actually saying, not what they, what people may imply. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit, about how my research on metaverse has been covered in the Western media. There's a lot of newspapers pick this up, and I'm not completely happy with some of the character information. So we'll talk about that in a minute. But back to national sovereignty. So this is an important, key, critical idea for China. And they want to protect national sovereignty above everything else. That's something that they see. So you'll see in the media, U.S. does something they don't like, they're going to say it's against their national sovereignty. But that being said, I think national sovereignty isn't just within their borders, but beyond that. They want to, make sure that their story is told, right? They talk about image sovereignty, things like that. We can get into that more if we have time, but that is a key component and something that they want to emphasize. So a little bit more on strategy. So you may have hopefully you've heard about this, building digital China, or in China it's referred to as new type infrastructure. Has anyone heard about this new type infrastructure? Well, aside from my colleagues. This is huge. This is huge, guys. And I think most in the West haven't heard about it. And guess what? When COVID started, they saw a window of opportunity to accelerate it. So in US dollars, about 1.75 trillion, as you can see, some different aspects. You can kind of imagine an application that it could use for metaverse, industrial internet, dual gigabit network, satellite internet network, naturally integrated system, big data centers. All these things could help, I think, move forward metaverse. And this is at the national level. This is one of the major priorities. And I think I've mentioned this a little bit before, but one of the things that they talk about in literature and news articles is this idea of first mover advantage, right? So one of the things that they see is, they want to continue to grow their economy, grow their GDP. They like to brag about it quite often. But this, if you imagine the metaverse, the amount of potential global users, the amount of commerce happening within it, you can imagine a lot of money and China progressing quite quickly. So they view this as a potential huge investment opportunity to really grab the market, be the first mover. Because before, they've had to be the ones to catch up. Now they can be the ones in the lead. They can be the first mover. Another benefit of that is they can help shape international norms. Why would we be worried about trying to shape the international norms? Anyone? Any thoughts on that?
Because not a democracy.
Exactly. They have different value set, obviously, and if they, if we live in a world where China is starting to shape the norms, we have big problems, and it's not going to be good for the United States or our allies and partners. So within the metaverse, they talk about if they can be the first mover, they can drive it forward. They can kind of build these norms around it and shape it to protect their national sovereignty. Remember, that's an important term, and also their interests in general. So that's something that they're thinking about as well. That's why they're putting such emphasis on it. And then finally, one thing I found interesting is that as a first mover in the metaverse, they might have some soft power benefits. When you think about soft power and how much Hollywood and all the media that we have, they might be able to shape the media, and there's been much research on this, help shape the media going forward if they're the first movers on the metaverse, they have the best metaverse applications, et cetera, et cetera. So that's another thing that they view as a potential huge win, right? All right, so now getting to my my research with these PLA daily articles. So let's go back in time just a little bit. November 2021, last year. The first mention of the metaverse is here in this article, uncovering the metaverse. So you would think it's going to be very aggressive, maybe, or you hear Battleverse. No, the very first mention of the Battleverse was peace. So the idea was to show civilians and others how terrible war was, to do a simulation to show the horrors of war and to potentially discourage others that we shouldn't go to war. So, it's just like, you might see like videos from people who don't want people to eat meat or things like that. It was that kind of idea, show the horrors of what war could be. So it's really interesting. So keep that in mind. Peace, November 2021. We're in peace here, right? So it's all good, right? Quickly, go to this year. Things change. We have January 2022, a new article comes out, again mentioning the Battleverse, and the meaning has changed. They say in the article titled "Looking Forward to the Battleverse," they define the Battleverse as a manifestation of the metaverse military field, right? So we have military application of the metaverse, not just some simulation of war, but how can the PLA use the metaverse to their benefit? And we have an example here with aircraft carrier. So they talk about you're on an aircraft carrier. Aside from the people that are driving the aircraft, everyone else gets a call that there's a training exercise. And everyone, as they state in this article, enters the cockpit of the virtual world. Keep in mind this technology is not currently available, but the idea is you could simulate an attack from the United States or another adversary while you're on the aircraft carrier or wherever. And you can even coordinate it with other parts of the military, et cetera. But I do like that quote, enter the cockpit of the virtual world. Kind of you get that image there. And I've already mentioned a little bit of this, but it does caveat within this article. There needs to be breakthroughs in large number of key technologies, virtual reality, augmented reality, mixed reality, all of these things, digital twinning. So, for example, something like you have missile in the real world, having it accurately digitized and acts as it would in the real world and virtual world. Cloud computing, blockchain, high-speed network, of course, and then AI. And then here, this is actually a picture from the article. Artist rendering, it said an article, artist rendering of the Battleverse. So you get an idea there. But yeah. And in that article, it also talked about how do we build Battleverse. So what are some things that you would need to make it applicable to the military? And you can think, in certain terms you see here, you can think of like a military network, right? It needs to be an independent network. It can't be connected to the civilian network. It needs to be something independent network communication links, right? Something separate. This is not part of the broader metaverse. Another thing that they talked about, and this is probably another no-brainer, authentication security. So we have, for example, CACs that we use now. They don't specify exactly what that looks like, but you have to make sure that if you're logging on to this military Battleverse, that they can identify you. Of course, there is diversified user access as well. So not everyone's going to be an admin, different rules for that. Immersive real-time interaction. This has been something that's been emphasized within the Metaverse, this real-time interaction, whether it be in the military application or otherwise. This is an important part of realizing what the Metaverse can be. So, someone could be in northern China, someone could be in another country, and they can interact like they're in the same room. Powerful AI bots. So with training, red, blue, China's red, they can simulate the U.S. and how they would act. And that's an important aspect we're getting into the benefits in just a minute, but that's an important aspect of the training. Of course, it needs to be realistic. You know, what's the point of doing simulations if it doesn't reflect the real world? And last one is flexible scene generation. So whatever type of geography you're trying to simulate, weather, all these different aspects that could affect how your military performs, that's what they're talking about. So, benefits of the battlefields. Education. Education, number one, right? They already have started to establish what's called the Cloud Party School, which is kind of a precursor where people can log in and connect in certain ways. But the idea with this education is, some units, some areas maybe are more remote. Maybe they're lacking in certain things that they need to know. And when you can simulate what we have now, like everyone here is in real life, you can simulate that in the metaverse. That's a huge, huge advantage. And educate, get everyone prepared in a much better way using this technology. Training is number two. Huge, huge, huge. Actual combat, something they talk about all the time. When Xi Jinping took power, he said, "You guys, what are you guys doing? You're not doing training very well. You're auto-winning, these trainings." He kind of went in and said, "You guys aren't doing a very good job." So this emphasis comes directly from Xi Jinping, the idea of actual combat. So with metaverse, potentially you can simulate, real worlds in a much better way. And what we already see a precursor to that just came out a couple weeks ago. New paratrooper program where they simulate, jumping out of a plane. They've already found that people are able to move faster through the program than they were before at a lower cost. So that's something that it's just one application that you can imagine extrapolating. And then I think in the past week or so, we don't know much about this one, Beijing Simulation Center. But the details of that are murky, but they just open that up for the PLA as well. Third benefit, testing. And this is something that, like with technology progresses, things like that, being able to test accurately different weapon systems and things like that in the metaverse, not having to, for example, maybe shoot off as many rockets that are very expensive or whatever it might be. It can be much cheaper and faster. You can advance faster. You can be a more lethal force. You can take out your adversaries, right? Research. So being able to quickly simulate and do other things, collaborate, do a lot of research. And the final thing I thought was interesting is they would use the metaverse as a backup communication. So obviously, U.S. or their adversaries in China would probably want to take out the communication capabilities. So they said, maybe we can use the metaverse or the battleverse rather as a backup communication. So you might be wondering, what's the U.S. doing? I'm not going to spend too much time on this, but just wanted to give you a little context. We're doing stuff too, okay? Let's go back to the 80s. SimNet, maybe you guys know about it. Wide area network with various vehicle simulations, real-time distributed combat simulation. So these are precursors, right, to what we're going to, what the metaverse can be. More recently, we had distributed interactive simulation, high-level architecture, real-time platform level wargaming, multiple host computers, something that has been utilized. But I want to give a shout out to Space Force and the Guardians. And we're supposed to have one person from there. All the services are doing things, but I wanted to give a big shout out to Space Force for various reasons. But this is Dr. Lisa Costa. She's the first permanent Chief Technology Innovation Officer. In a recent interview, she said that Space Force needs to take advantage of investments the industry is going to be making in the metaverse. And why do you think people dealing with space would want to be dealing with utilizing the metaverse, maybe more so than others? Any ideas?
Satellite networks.
Right. So what about space is different than, say, land or water that might be conducive to
It's contested domain.
Yeah. So yeah, I think all of you have some different answers. Basically, what Lisa Costa says is that you can think about a Navy guy going out on a ship. You can think about, when I worked in the United States Air Force Academy, you see people, going out in planes. You can do that. But going up to space, after I'm gonna have a schedule to go into space, do different things. It's a lot harder. So being able to simulate that, it's huge for guardians, people working in the Space Force, to understand space in a much more immersive way. So that's the idea. Space Force is doing a lot, or they're talking a big game at least. But Army, Navy, everyone has different things they're working on in various forms. But again, Space Force is uniquely in position, I think, to move forward with that. So, if you remember, what was it? November 2021, right? Peace. Now, guess what? We're March, I believe. I didn't put the date down. Metaverse, new heights of future cognitive work. We went from peace. Now how do we fight the war in the metaverse? So it's really interesting, this transition of language. And it's very quickly, and it's over a few months. So the metaverse, new heights of future cognitive work. This article. Wharton first point out the Institute of Military Political Work, Academy of Military Science. This is very much closely connected with Central Military Commission, like the various highest levels of Chinese government, Chinese military. So when you see AMS, Academy of Military Sciences, saying something, you definitely want to write down, take some notes, because it has a higher level of authoritativeness. With the other articles, being in the PLA Daily, obviously there's going to be some vetting and things like that. So it's not just people throwing it out. There is some level of credibility there, where it's, well, when you see Academy of Military Sciences, it's a big deal. So, how do we fight this war against an adversary metaverse? They talk about three different things. Platform confrontation. Basically, the idea of you directly attack a metaverse, and opponents or adversaries metaverse, directly try to disrupt it, destroy it, etc. And then there's other ways that they talk about. Number two, system attack. So what I've gathered, some of it can be a little vague in the language, but what I gathered is this is basically essentially attacking the supply chain. So he's talking about hitting keynotes of the industry and things like that. So hurting the supply chain so your adversary cannot effectively run their metaverse. And then I'm sad to say that Dr. Healy is not here, but he actually talks about this third method, indirect diversion. He talks about different ways of hacking VR. Definitely go read his research. He knows much more about that. But the idea here, very quickly, is that you disrupt, maybe the information that you're getting, or perhaps you could even just disorient, someone using the metaverse. There's different. It's more subtle, of course, indirect diversion, just to kind of disrupt, without realizing you're on full-scale attack. You might not even realize you're being attacked at all. One of the things you mentioned is like having someone not realize they're walking, to a different part of the room and they're disoriented in terms of like where they are. And there's a lot of different things that he does a better job of explaining. It's really interesting, that subtle sort of technique that he mentioned as well. In another article, not in the PLA, but in a magazine, I thought it was interesting. They connect great power competition and the metaverse. And the author, in their opinion, believes that there's going to be an inevitable conflicts or competition with the metaverse. And that's going to be a major issue. It's coming. Obviously we already have major conflict and issues with China, and this is going to be another area. But just I put this in red just as caveats. They're talking about this, they're writing about this, but it doesn't mean that they have this capability. Some of that coverage, like I mentioned in the news, the Western media globally has covered this research, kind of making the clickbait title that they're ready to do this immediately. They're ready to do a lot of different things. But this is something they're talking about. This is something in the future for most of this. We do see precursors to certain aspects of it, but it doesn't mean that they have this capability. So I just want to reemphasize that. And also, some of the questions we may have, I may not know, because China is famously lacks transparency. So we I'm happy to get, there's so much information that we have, but, there's a lot of stuff that we don't know. And it's a challenge for my colleagues at Cassie to try to suss out, important information. So, yeah, so,
Excuse me,
yes.
who was the author that you referenced for the indirect diversion that we should read about?
So this is the right here, Institute of Military Political Work, Academy of Military Science.
I think you meant the doctor you said you can explain.
The doctor.
Oh, the
Right.
doctor. Sorry. Abe Ely at BAHE. He's on it. He was originally on the program.
Okay.
He's on the website.
Yeah, he's on the website.
Yeah.
He has amazing research. He's actually done lab and other things. We've actually doing stuff in the past. Definitely check that out because, it's really interesting work. I think that's something that we have to think about. So some conclusions, some thoughts, and again, like I mentioned at the beginning, if you have to ask a question, you have a thought, about this or ideas or where you see the metaverse, share that as well, because we're all here. We're an academic, tracks. We're all here to learn, including me. So first thing that I want to mention, again, to reiterate, this is a nascent technology. So this is new territory. Some people call it the Wild West. Some of the people that are actually building it call it the Wild West. And where the metaverse develops, how it develops, who becomes the dominant players, we don't really know. And so it's like trying to, go back in time and think about what the internet's impact is going to have. It's that sort of level. So we are here at the beginning, so there's a lot more work to be done, and just want to keep that in mind, because I'm, to re-speculating and just going on what China's saying, but we are not really, I think it's going to move quickly, faster than anyone really thinks, or some people think, and it's going to impact your life in many ways that you don't even think about right now. So number two, as we discussed, China has positioned itself to be a major player. I think that hopefully I made that clear. All the different things, that was just a sample of what they're doing in the private sector, and of course in the military sector, with 5-year plans, etc. This is part of, again, embedded into the highest level, all the way back, remember when we had Xi Jinping on the screen, it goes all the way up to the very top. So this is not something that, a few companies think is important, or a few people here and there. It's being integrated into the strategy. So what can we do? I have a few thoughts I'd like to hear from you. How can we deal with, China trying to push as the metaverse, the leader, first mover, trying to dominate, trying to create these norms? So my solution, or some solutions, is, the biggest thing that we have over China is our allies and partners. And one of the people I work for, a dean at Tsinghua University, Yang Shuidong, he wrote a paper in the New York Times many years ago now. How does China defeat the United States? Right? What did he say? He said that China needs to build their allies and partners to compete with the United States. He said that the United States, that's their biggest asset, and China needs to compete with that if they're going to have any chance. I did have that picture with China and the United States coming together on that one slide, but really, it's not just China and the United States. It's our partners and allies together. Number two, we're kind of holding this all together, but we're at MCPA, so I have to talk about STEM. That's part of our mission. We're trying to help the leaders now, but also the future leaders. So that's critically important for who builds, creates, and adapts the metaverse. This education is critical. If one of person I talk to a lot, like General Shanahan, he mentions, with AI, we're to take our foot off the gas at the moment, we're going to fall behind. You could say that, in the sense with AI as part of the metaverse. If we don't continue to push forward and innovate, then we're going to have a problem. And another thing is, looking at just in general, like the economic growth of China, if they to double or even triple the GDP of the United States, then we have to, with less resources, be better at innovating. That being said, I just want to make a caveat that in a previous conference I was at earlier, former Prime Minister Rudd of Australia mentioned that because of the authoritarian nature and decisions and some of the things that they're doing right now, it's not a given that China's economy is going to go that quickly and that much above us. But we'll see. If they can be the first mover in certain aspects of the metaverse, then maybe they can build their economy that way in many other ways. And then talk about innovation. But another thing, talking about our allies and partners. Just like the internet, it wasn't built by just it wasn't continued to develop by just one guy or one company. It should be shouldn't be the Chinese Communist Party metaverse that's dominating. It should be a community. It should be decentralized. We can work with our allies and partners and build something, I think, that is much, much more robust, much more powerful than what some, authoritarian dictatorship, if you will, create. So again, and then innovation, as I mentioned before, is critical. Since we have a little bit of time, we get to do one bonus slide for fun, and then we can kind of open up discussion. I want it to be kind of a discussion, not just questions. So, we talked about how important cyberspace is. So let's cut up a little bit there. That's okay. So, Chinese Communist Party decided they wanted to make a song about how important being a cyber superpower is. So very exciting. I'm not going to make you guys sing this, so don't worry. But just look at this slide for a minute or two, and some of the lyrics. Let's see. So, cyber superpower, tell the world the Chinese dream, China rise. We mentioned that cyber technology is connected with China's rejuvenation, becoming their rightful place as a dominant power. So, yeah, this kind of reflects some of those ideas that we talked about. So I thought that was kind of interesting. But you can go online, you can see the performance of this. It's very riveting, of course, as all the Chinese Communist Party official songs are. So, yes. So, yeah. Let's see. Any other lines that stick out to you before we move on to just general thoughts and questions and insights that you may have?
5,000 years.
Yeah, tell me, why does this stick out?
Having lived in Korea for a long time, I learned a lot about how they view themselves as the center of the globe, and they're trying to, again, reproject that to and influence the whole world again, like they used to.
Yeah, absolutely. Anything else? I have a question for you guys. Just in this presentation, hopefully you learned a little bit. Is there anything that surprised you or kind of sparked your interest or your thoughts? Like anything that you got from this that maybe you didn't know before, or something that you want to share? Yes.
We all know that China wants to take back Taiwan, and this seems to be the best simulated system that they could invent to, hey, let's run a Taiwanese invasion through the metaverse down to the individual level, decision maker levels, all the way up to the tactical and strategic. But then you also said in your presentation today that you have it's going to be like the internet, the way it was built. And the internet was built for good, and now it's really turned into something pretty much evil, distributing evil around. So is the metaverse going to be the same way, but accelerated, where they're going to have an end goal, what they want to get out of their metaverse? Is that going to be good or evil?
Right. Yeah,
depending on whose perspective you're looking at.
Yes, and as we said before, they're the first mover. They're shaping the norms. Big problem. I think
Yeah, Josh. So, I think one of the I completely agree with you and many scholars and talking heads that the source our greatest source of power is we have real friends, right? And I think speaking for the West generally, I think the situation in Ukraine probably put an exclamation point on that. And China tried to do this with the One Belt, One Road. How is that, from your perspective, how is that playing out in the real world? Because I saw originally it seemed like everybody was, hey, free infrastructure, but then, oh, you missed a payment, we're taking over your port. Seems to be some pushback. So
Yeah,
what's your perspective?
So yeah, One Belt Road, like trying to, I don't know, like use their economic advantage to those that have less disadvantage, building these infrastructure, building these roads, et cetera, to try to kind of get this alliance. But you could have another article that I'll write like, it's a business partner kind of relationship, it's not a true friendship. So there's that aspect, and also just the conditions that come. And then yes, you already kind of hinted at that. BRI Belt Road Initiative is stuttering, bumbling as it is now. So these are attempts, right? And we also have different things going on. We have Solomon Islands, Djibouti, these kind of type of bases, and these type of agreements that could play a role. But who's going to come if there's a conflict? The bottom line is who's going to come and back up China if there's a conflict? I mean, you got North Korea, right? So that's cool. They're going to do some crazy stuff. They're going to attack Sony maybe. But beyond that, I think that they don't have, they're trying with these investments and things like that. But again, I don't think that it's there. I don't think that they have that advantage.
Maybe they're not buying military allies. They could be buying votes in international forums.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you look at that. That's one of the things that they write about is going into different international organizations, that already exist, instead of creating new ones and trying to dominate those as well. So we've seen that in different ways as well. So that's another concern.
And that's written into like some of the BRI agreements as well. Like, hey, yeah, we're going to do this for you, but remember when somebody starts asking questions about our sovereignty or human rights or whatever, you got our back, right?
And Lord knows our country's not investing in small Caribbean nations.
But this also provides that authoritative control. But one of the downsides of it is, a small bunch of power brokers can only get so many places at once. I imagine in China with their dense population that is especially hard. This kind of puts another way to export that authority, which could be interesting. It could backfire, but it could also lead to some interesting developments in military command structure where it is, like as we're seeing with the Russians in Ukraine, without the senior NCOs, basically they wait for the general. I know for China that's expected to be a problem. Now with this, you could potentially literally have that general on your shoulder without getting sniped. So.
Yeah. Any other comments, Troy? I guess
I'm curious what you think the security implications are.
Yeah.
Not holding you to it, but
Right. That was actually something I was going to ask you guys, but I'll start. So think about the security implications of the current and how it is now. Imagine something more integrated into your life, something using even more, many different ways that we don't even know right now, and the impact that's disrupted. You can't use it accurately. It could be, imagine I don't know. There's so many different things that it could be if you're using something on a daily basis. Maybe going back to like automated driving. There's different thoughts about utilizing the metaverse within a vehicle. Imagine disrupting that. What market that could be, or any other thing. But there's a lot of different things. So that was actually good question. That was actually something I wanted to ask you guys. Is what more broadly the implications of the metaverse, whether it be security or your life. I see the metaverse as kind of this inevitability, right? We have, from very basic technology, we started creating the computer, and we have now in our pockets, we have what? We have our phones, right? technology is becoming more and more integrated, more and more connected. You know, it was very passive. Now, Elon Musk says we're essentially cyborgs with our phone, you know, and we're able to access that. But imagine that more integrated. That's where we're headed. That's kind of the evolution that I think is. So we have, you know, we have technology over here, we have people, now it's more and more integrated to everything that we do, enhance what we're able to do. So that's my thought. There's certain like Ray Kurzweil and others futurists that definitely stand out there. But so for you, what is implication of security or any other thoughts you want to have on where the metaverse?
Surveillance. I know they're building it, and I know that the social credit scoring system and the way they track everything you do already have.
Yes.
What are the implications for us for the globe for that? I mean, we see with like Buffalo shooter, right? A lot of these people are also radicalized in these alternate reality, like the social aspect of video games. And we can't even keep off of Twitter. So how do we defend against both the building in this massive surveillance that's global, and then also the radicalization, information operations, influence operations?
Yeah, that's a tough question. So with technology, I think there's trade-offs that you have to have. You know, with social media, it's great. Like I can connect with someone I knew kind of in high school and other people, and you know, you have your information out there. And if this is more integrated, you're gonna have more information. There's gonna be more security vulnerabilities. So how do we combat that? I don't know. Like I think that there's different technological answers and the things of how we go about as we evolve with that. But I don't really have a great answer for that. But any other thoughts on implications?
So like, how would something like this, living inside the metaverse, right? It's probably something that humans become addicted to, of living in an open reality, of somewhere where you're not actually alive. How is that like going to affect people's mental health in the long term? Like how are you going to be able to cope with that?
Yep. Yeah. So actually, let's see where it is now. They mentioned it here that research that I mentioned on the metaverse and national security. That's actually one of the major points that they ask about this. You know, what is the implication for our society if people, like you said, get addicted? And, you know, like, well, the Chinese Communist Party authoritarian rule, they're going to limit use, right? They're going to control it. But for us, the United States, you know, we have people already like, you know, quote living, you know, in the virtual reality, like where they wake up and put the goggles on, they're in that all day. So while there's huge amounts of benefits of the metaverse, education, etc., there is also that, you know, becoming too disconnected with the real world. We're talking about virtual environments, but you know, we could also have augmented reality and different things. But yeah, becoming too addicted, you know, is a problem now with, you know, some people, you know, people have died playing video games like that. So it's similar problems we have to deal with. We don't have, thankfully, the option to force people to control.
Yeah. In your solutions, you said decentralization and community. And I was wondering, like the Bitcoin or Ethereum, those cryptos that exist today and are used as payment networks, like they're a lot smaller than Swift or Fedwire, like currently. But a lot of them are developed open source, by internationals and all that kind of thing. So what's the ability, for example, we have to sanction people when they're using those payments? So if we as the West, all of our payment rails are decentralized and open, and then basically we can't sanction them, how do we unite against a metaverse where they can impose sanctions and be like, everyone in my metaverse follows the same rules. Everyone in your metaverse gets to write their own rule or has this, you know, dogmatic freedom.
Yeah, so you're talking about like an actual country that's a bad actor.
Well, like, so like Bitcoin payments you can send to Russia right now, probably.
Right.
But so Bitcoin was like the major payment system, and the West is heralding it because it's decentralized and community-based and developed open source software. I mean, isn't that a loss for American power?
Well, that's one way to take it. Other people view it as an increase in anonymity, an increase in freedom. And I don't know. That's something that policymakers, I think, you know, we're going to have to decide, going forward, how are we going to utilize this? And, that's a good question. It's hard to answer.
Let's say, based on this, I mean, it's basically a large simulation, particularly for your aircraft example. We already have problems with having our simulations model reality. Differences in health. This strikes me as being very akin to an extremely high fidelity model, which is going to require a lot more work to get right. And particularly for training and stuff, if you don't get it right, there's going to be some interesting code implications to that.
Yes. Yeah, actual combat, if it's not realistic, then you're wasting your time. But just another note on that is that you can be connected from, separate places. One of the things that we emphasize in the United States and others, but also People's Liberation Army, is this idea of jointness. And this is another way of coming in the simulation, doing a joint campaign, having the logistics right, unlike Russia, and being able to take Taiwan as really nice.
Yeah, I found your point on the back communications part very interesting. I guess it just bears like in building the metaverse, you're also building an infrastructure there to support it.
Right.
That makes their network more resilient, and then also maybe more access points outside of China.
Yeah, I thought that stood out as kind of like unique points on the back of communication. So yeah, I don't know exactly. As I said, this is things in the future. It's not built yet, so I don't know exactly what it's going to look like. But yeah, it's interesting that information is key more, and understanding situational awareness, where everything is, what your adversary is doing. If you lose communication, lose that information, then you're going to lose probably the conflict. So it's just interesting that they emphasize that in that article as an alternative that potentially could be used. They continue to maintain their campaign and move forward. Yeah, what it looks like, I don't know. And again, just I have these points, but a lot of this is it's relatively vague, some of it, and again, the transparency. There's not a lot of information. It was just interesting though, the emphasis on the metaverse and all these articles and Gila Daily and everywhere else that I researched. Yeah.
Josh, question for you. In your reading of some of the original sources, I'm assuming that you're probably reading Chinese or translations of Chinese.
Yeah, Chinese directly. Yes.
Are there any indications that the CCP is trying to export any of these technologies and ideas to some of their maybe authoritarian customers around the world? Metaverse technologies, are they exporting it into that yet? Maybe adding them to the BRI, or is that still
No, yes,
silent?
that is, someone call it like, I think, digital Silk Road, things like that. There is maybe, certain technology that could be applied to that.
Sure.
But yeah, they are, different surveillance equipment, for example, is something that they have exported to many countries. So I think there's a lot of examples that are all top of the head, but yes, they're absolutely doing that, pushing that. When you have control of, certain infrastructure and things, you can maybe use backdoor and know what's going on. So yeah, that's absolutely happening. I'll see they want to continue to move that forward. Yeah, any other thoughts? We're getting close to lunch. We got the barbecue, so I don't want to hold you up there, but any other final thoughts? Anything else we can break?
Okay, please give God for